Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Unseen Wisdom. If you enjoy these deep dives, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment and subscribe to the channel for more. Today we're going to unpack something really fascinating, the future of the African mining industry. You see recent news about this. Investing in African Mining Indaba conference held in Cape Town kind of got me thinking. Everyone knows Africa has enormous mineral wealth, right? But what does it actually take to turn that potential into like a real driver of economic growth, not just for Africa, but for the whole world? That's what we're going to explore today. To guide us through this complex landscape, I've got someone here who can connect the dots like no other. You're an expert in not just global economics, but also sustainable development and the mining sector itself. It's like the perfect combination for this deep dive.
It's great to be here. This is a topic I'm really passionate about.
Okay, so let's jump right in. We often hear about Africa's vast mineral reserves, but it's easy to just gloss over the details. What should our listener really understand about the sheer scale and significance of these resources?
Well, what's fascinating is that it's not just about quantity, it's about what these resources represent for the future.
Yeah.
Africa holds a significant portion of the world's minerals, over 30% in fact. But the key here is that this includes many minerals that are absolutely crucial for green technologies. We're talking cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements, things that are essential for electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines, you name it.
So it's like holding the keys to a greener future. But the question is, how do you unlock that potential?
Exactly. And that's where it gets interesting because Africa is facing this complex web of challenges. It's not enough to simply extract these minerals. You need to think about infrastructure processing and ensuring these resources actually benefit everyone, not just a select few.
That's a perfect segue to my next question. What stood out to you from the news coverage of the Indaba conference in terms of the biggest hurdles Africa needs to overcome?
Well, one that was impossible to miss is the issue of legal mining. It was a recurring theme throughout the conference. It's a massive problem undermining legitimate operations, putting workers at risk, damaging the environment.
I see this echoed in so many reports. It's like this dark underbelly of the mining sector that's hard to ignore. What struck me is that it's not just a legal problem, it's an economic one too, right?
Absolutely. Often, illegal mining is a symptom of poverty and lack of opportunity. People turn to it out of desperation. So tackling this effectively requires more than just law enforcement. It requires creating viable economic alternatives for those who are involved.
Makes you think about the complexity of this issue. It's not a simple fix. What else was high on the agenda at the Indaba conference?
Another major theme was the need for infrastructure development. Many African countries simply don't have the transportation networks needed to support a thriving mining industry. We're talking about roads, railways, ports, all crucial for getting those resources out of the ground and to where they need to go.
And it's not just about getting them out of the ground, right? It's also about what happens to them next.
Yes, this is where the concept of value addition comes in. And it was a hot topic at the Indaba conference. Essentially, it's about moving beyond just exporting raw materials and instead focusing on processing those materials within Africa itself.
So instead of just shipping out raw bauxite, for example, you'd be processing it into alumina and then aluminum capturing more of the value chain within the continent.
Exactly. And the revenue difference is staggering. The Indaba conference highlighted how a nation like Guinea, which largely exports raw bauxite, earns a fraction of what a country like Australia makes from its robust aluminum processing industry.
So it's not just about having the resources, it's about having the infrastructure and the know-how to actually transform them into higher value products. That's a crucial takeaway for our listener.
Absolutely. And to do that effectively, you need another key ingredient: people, specifically a new generation of skilled workers and leaders. And that's what we'll explore in part 2.
Welcome back. It's great to delve deeper into this. I'm particularly interested in the people side of this equation. The Indaba conference really seemed to emphasize the importance of investing in the next generation of miners, especially women and youth. Why is that so crucial for, like, future-proofing the industry?
Well, it's about more than just having enough workers, right? It's about cultivating a workforce that's equipped to handle the challenges and the opportunities of this rapidly evolving industry. I mean, think about it. Mining is becoming increasingly technologically advanced. We're talking automation, data analytics, AI, all things that require a very different skill set than traditional mining.
So it's about moving away from that image of the miner with a pickaxe and towards something more tech-savvy.
Exactly. And that's where the youth come in, you know? They're digital natives, they're adaptable, they're eager to learn. But it's not just about technical skills, it's also about fostering this mindset of sustainability and ethical practices.
That's an interesting point. It's almost like you need a whole new generation to really shift the culture of the mining industry.
And that's where empowering women is so vital. Studies have shown that companies with more women in leadership roles tend to have stronger environmental and social performance. They bring different perspectives, different values, and they're often much more attuned to the needs of communities.
It makes you wonder why it took so long for the industry to recognize this.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift in recent years, but there's still a long way to go. That's why the Indaba conference focused on concrete actions like increased investment in STEM education mentorship programs specifically for women in mining and support for youth-owned mining enterprises. It's about creating a more inclusive and diverse workforce that really reflects the population of the continent.
This whole idea of sustainable and ethical mining seems to be gaining a lot of traction these days. What did the experts at the Indaba conference have to say about that?
Well, it was front and center in almost every discussion. There's this growing recognition that mining can't just be about extracting resources at any cost. It has to be done in a way that minimizes environmental damage, protects community rights, and contributes to long-term development.
So it's not just about doing less harm, it's about doing more good. What does that look like in practice?
Transparency is a big one. Mining companies need to be open about their operations, their environmental impact, and how they actually engage with local communities. And it's not just about disclosing information, it's about having this meaningful dialogue with stakeholders and incorporating their feedback.
So no more backroom deals, everything out in the open.
That's the ideal.
Yeah.
And it's becoming increasingly important for investors as well. They're starting to demand more transparency and accountability from the companies they invest in.
It sounds like the whole industry is being forced to kind of clean up its act.
And it's not just external pressure, it's also coming from within. Many mining companies are realizing that being sustainable and ethical is actually good for business. It reduces risks, it improves community relations, and it attracts a more talented workforce.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
In theory, yes. But it's important to remember that this shift requires a significant change in mindset. There are still many challenges to overcome, and we'll dive into those in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back for the final part of our exploration into the future of African mining. We've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, the need for new skills, and a more ethical approach. Now, I want to get your take on what it will actually take to make this vision of a future-proofed African mining industry a reality.
Yeah, it's a complex puzzle with many pieces, but one thing that really stood out from the Indaba conference was this emphasis on collaboration. We've talked about the roles of governments, mining companies, and local communities, but it goes beyond that. We need to bring in civil society organizations, international partners, investors. Right. Everyone has a part to play.
It sounds like a massive undertaking. How do you even begin to coordinate something like that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's not just about top-down planning. It's also about fostering this sense of shared ownership. It's about creating spaces for dialogue, building trust, and recognizing that everyone brings something valuable to the table. The Indaba conference itself was a great example of this, bringing together such diverse voices and perspectives to brainstorm solutions.
One thing I keep coming back to is the sheer scale of the challenge. We're talking about an entire continent with diverse cultures, political systems, economic realities. How do you create a model that works for everyone?
That's where regional collaboration becomes so important. We're already seeing some promising initiatives like the Southern African Development Community's Protocol on Mining. It aims to harmonize policies and standards across the region, creating more level playing field and promoting responsible practices.
So it's about finding ways to work together, share best practices, and learn from each other's successes and failures.
Exactly. And it's not just about sharing knowledge, it's also about sharing resources. Many African nations simply don't have the financial or technical capacity to develop their mining sector sustainably on their own. That's where international partnerships can come in, providing investment technology transfer capacity building support.
But it's a delicate balance, right? I mean, we've talked about the history of exploitation in Africa, where foreign companies extracted resources with very little benefit flowing back to the continent. How do we ensure that these new partnerships are truly equitable?
That's the million-dollar question. It requires strong governance both at the national and regional levels. It means having clear regulations, transparent contracts, and mechanisms for holding companies accountable. And it means empowering local communities to have a real say in how these mining projects impact their lives.
So it's not just about getting a good deal, it's about changing the whole power dynamic, making sure that African nations are truly in control of their own resources and their own destinies.
It's a tall order, but the potential rewards are immense. If we can get this right, if we can future-proof African mining, it won't just benefit Africa, it will benefit the entire world.
That brings us back to this idea of a greener future.
Hmm.
We started by talking about how Africa holds the key to a more sustainable world.
Hmm.
What do you see as the ultimate vision for how African mining can contribute to that?
I envision a future where African mining is not just about extraction, but about transformation, where those raw materials are processed into high-value products within Africa itself, creating jobs, boosting economies, and driving technological innovation. A future where mining is a force for good, contributing to social upliftment, environmental protection, and lasting prosperity for all Africans.
It's an inspiring vision and one that I think gives our listeners a lot to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want to leave them with?
The future of African mining is not predetermined. It's a future that we are creating right now through the choices we make, the partnerships we forge, and the values we uphold. It's a future that requires collaboration, innovation, and a commitment to doing things differently. And it is a future worth fighting for.
On that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Unseen Wisdom. A huge thank you to you for sharing your insights and your expertise. It's been a truly illuminating conversation.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking explorations. Until next time, keep seeking the unseen wisdom.